Welcome to MTG Evolving Wild. My name's Mark,
I'm Cody.
And I am Ron.
and today we're going to be talking about Commander, and more specifically, the cards that have recently been exclusively made for Commander and have made their way into a lot of other products.
Yeah. We did a little bit of research on this. Um, just to say, there have been a lot of commander focused things going on in Magic sets over the last 4 years.
Right. And I feel like a point that we've mentioned a lot earlier on in the podcast is how much Commander has impacted the game as a whole. So I'm super excited to get into that.
Yeah, just from like some rough stats, there have been over 50% of all commanders that have been printed in the last 4 years.
And these are unique commanders, not reprints of old commanders.
Yeah, they are kind of flooding the format with just a lot of options. And to an extent, that's really good, but it also becomes very overwhelming and just like a lot.
Yeah, no, you said it great, Mark. There is a real fatigue at times with just how many options are available to you if you go to sit down and build a commander deck.
Yeah, the product bloat is real. It's crazy.
I think, Commander kind of has this problem already because it's a format where pretty much every new thing printed in Magic the Gathering, unless it is specifically a reprint of another card, is a new card that can go in Commander. And when you start adding to that like cards that are specifically designed for Commander, sets, products, precons, all with unique new cards that are designed specifically for Commander, it's an unfathomable number of cards. Like,
Not just that, but I mean, Magic's been around for 30 years. And the vast majority of all of those cards you can play in Commander.
and the vast majority of all of those cards for Commander have been printed recently. I just
What are some of the numbers for the past few years that we've seen?
so in what's like a good number to even start at? In 2019, there were 78 unique new commanders printed. In 2020, there were 186. In 2021, there were 193. And in 2022, there were 362 new commanders. Just commanders, not cards printed for Commander.
And how many do we have so far this year?
I think this is counting the Lord of the Rings set, which just came out at the time of recording. It's like 226, and we're halfway through the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still Commander Masters.
Which is going to be filled with them.
There's the Doctor Who sets. There's Eldraine that still needs to come out. And do we get to Ixalan this year?
I think maybe, or is that, or it's either early next year or late this year.
Yeah, I think Eldraine might be the last one.
I think Eldraine is the last one. I think
Yeah.
Ixalan is like
Probably
January.
early next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, just even like, since we mainly play Commander, we've really seen this kind of grow and take shape and take over the whole format. Like, I remember when Archaeomancer's map came out in Strixhaven Commander, and that was like like a very cool, unique, like good white card. Everyone thought it was going to be a new staple for white decks. Everyone wanted it, and right now, I mean, I think it's still a really good white card for just white decks, but like it feels like every time there's a new Commander release, there's a new white card that's good for every white deck.
Well, to be fair to White, It had been so terrible in Commander for the longest time. So it did need a little bit of help.
And at this point, you could pretty much fill it up with new cards from the last 4 years and just have like a unbelievably good white deck. Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's real. I'm excited. I've been brewing around the Mother of Machines, Elish Norn, and it's been really cool to experiment because I used to have a Flicker deck of my own, and now with every new set, I realized, with this really awesome but scary commander, and half of the deck I was playing was white, plus all this new stuff. Yeah, like I could easily go without blue and just kind of focus in on that, and I think it's really interesting because like while white is getting all this advantage, it's usually towards specific themes. Like I noticed they're really trying to lean into some of the archetypes that white wants to lean into, such as going wide with making a lot of creatures to get a lot of creature ETBs, or blink to get those ETBs. But they're all tied into you sort of building your board state or something. So yeah, I don't know. And I feel like there's a lot of themes in general that Commander has kind of spawned as an archetype because it's only playable in Commanders with specific Commander cards that are found in a lot of new sets that are getting recurring support.
yeah, I was kind of curious real quick before we move on. Like, what do you guys like? Do you guys keep up with when a new set comes out? Like, I know I have like 10-ish commander decks, and I don't like check every single one of those every time a new set comes out to see if there's new cards for it. Like, how do you guys go about when a new set comes out, like looking at new cards? Like, do you guys care? Like, is it hard to keep up with?
So naturally, I do still kind of keep up with spoilers, and I'm looking for new stuff all the time. But a lot of times, once a deck is built for me, as long as it's still functioning the way I want it to, I kind of just leave it alone. I try not to tinker with it too much and screw up what I have working.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel you. I also have over 10 commander decks as well, and it's a lot to keep track of. And I feel like with each new set, I'm getting new things. And really what it's kind of devolved into is me getting updates of the new spoilers on my social media feeds. From there, I like to use Reddit, so I see what the most upvoted cards are and the things that are generating the most hype. And from there, I can usually discern, okay, I want this card, or no, I don't really want this card. Occasionally, there are some sleeper hits that I might find out about later, a few months down the line. But yeah, I try to keep them updated, and I really am always kind of keeping my eye on specific cards, because if I see a card that is amazing for my specific strategy that is pretty undervalued because people only see it as very narrow, I pick it up because I don't know if the cost of that is going to skyrocket or plummet.
That's kind of the tough thing, is like, especially when you bring in like the cost of cards and how the secondary market shifts, is like, I feel like if you're not paying attention at all times, you're not getting the like benefits of like when a card is cheap. Like,
Right.
you maybe start to notice the card as it becomes the most expensive card in the set, but prior to that, if you're not like, oh, like this fits perfectly and like this and this and all this stuff, then you kind of miss it when it's a 30-cent card, and then all of a sudden it becomes $20 or $30, and certain constructed formats like Standard or Pioneer might be running 4 ofs of each. And
That was actually what I was just about to say, was that I feel like Commander has less to do with the price like shooting up like it does, as much as like how much play it sees in Pioneer or Modern, which I feel like are the more competitive
Format.
yeah, exactly.
you also need more copies of each one for those formats. So
No, exactly. But that I think contributes to the price increase
Yeah.
more than it just being a good card for like Commander, where you only need one.
Right, and I will say there are some cards that overlap as good cards in other formats and in Commander, like Shieldred sees a lot of play in Standard at the time of this recording, but she's also a fantastic and pretty popular mono-black Commander.
Yeah, I mean, she also sees play in Pioneer.
I should have specified Shieldred the Apocalypse.
And she
go.
sees
There's 3 of
play
them now.
in
Yes, too many Shieldreds.
Modern, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a lot of formats. So there are certain cards that overlap, but yeah, I think it's interesting when you factor in other formats. But for the purposes of Commander, yeah, maybe I've also kind of been noticing that some of the good cards in these other formats are kind of meant for Commander that just happen to be breaking the format. Like Pauper is another thing, but Commander-based cards and multiplayer cards are just happen to be legal in these other formats,
Yeah.
and it warps the other formats too.
Like, for example, the Monarch, what is it? Undercity, right?
Oh, the Initiative.
Taking the initiative and Monarch, Pauper
and then more
specifically.
recently, I don't know how much it'll impact things, but I'm curious to see the Ring Tempts You, if that gets, like from the Lord of the Rings set, if that brings any effect to Pauper.
Oh, 100% I feel like it's going to, because you get 2 Ring Tempts You levels and you get to draw and discard. That is incredibly powerful.
That's true. You already get a form of card advantage with the second one. Plus, interestingly enough, this is kind of delving into another topic, but one of the most popular, or one of the more popular removal spells in Pauper is the 2-mana card that destroys a non-legendary creature.
Is it the red one?
No, it's black. It's a black and a colorless, and it says just destroy target non-legendary creature.
For whatever reason, all I can think of are the ones that say like destroy target legendary creature.
Yeah, the main point being that card is really popular
It's cast down. Yeah.
cast down. So that card is like when the Ring Tempts You, you pick a creature and you make it legendary. And because commons aren't legendary, all of a sudden you have a creature that can't be killed by cast down. So maybe that's relevant, but either way, it's a new thing that's been added to Pauper because of a format or a card designed for Commander. Or multiple cards designed for Commander. We see the same things in other formats for sure. I know we were talking in the Standard episode about Feldon, I think. The Feldon that was in Standard.
Right.
That, if it was non-legendary, I'd be running 4 of them in a deck if I could, and sometimes I might, but that has a result being that, you can only have 1 at a time because they are legendary. And we see cards like designed for Commander warp these other formats, but I think we also see like just the inclusion of cards designed for Commander in sets that are not designed for Commander, like Standard and maybe certain modern products like Modern Horizons or Lord of the Rings, I guess technically. But you see a lot of those just kind of be introduced and do things in a format that maybe they're not initially intended to do things to.
Right. That's how much it's warped the game as a whole. But, yeah.
And it kind of even transcends to how they like seed the pack sometimes, especially with set boosters too. There's like those cards that are exclusively like you can only pull them from set boosters
And collector boosters.
I don't think you can pull them from collector boosters. All right, maybe we're wrong. We'll have to look that one up. But I think, set and or collector boosters, and they are only like designed specifically for Commander, and you can, they're not guaranteed by any means. They're like hard to pull. You can't get them from draft boosters, so they're not even designed for the regular set release for Standard. So kind of another interesting point where they're just trying to sell Commander in a product that maybe isn't supposed to sell Commander, but just ties that in.
No, absolutely. The first card that comes to mind is like Wedding Ring, but there's been cards, in basically every set that we've picked up that have had Commander exclusive products in the set boosters.
Yeah. At least one per set, I want to say, if not two or three.
Hell, half the times I feel like when I open a box of set boosters, I get one of the pre-con commanders like tucked away in one of the packs.
Yeah, that happens.
Typically, I always get the side commanders.
I think usually I get like one of the four or one of the however many commanders come with the commander product. But yeah, like these cards are kind of just put into, again, products that maybe aren't designed for, standard or what the set is kind of supposed to be. And maybe that's, I don't know, a good thing because Commander's such a popular format and it's getting so much more support, but it does feel like a lot.
It's both a good and a bad thing, I guess, because like it's always great to have more people in the community and, getting into Magic. Love that. But Commander is also just like such a difficult format to like break your teeth on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is and it isn't. I think, yeah, while if you play really complicated decks and really if you get to that depth of deck building where us as a pod has, yeah, but if you just grab a bunch of precons, I think while there are some interactions that are tricky, I don't think it's going to be more tricky than picking up a couple of precons for some other formats.
I mean, I think precons have started like to become more designed for people who are more familiar with Magic than straight up new players. They have designed those
the starter precons,
the starter
particularly.
precons.
So that might have been a better particular one to mention.
Right.
But yeah, I guess in general, I have been noticing the precons being more and more souped up.
We had a Commander game very recently where we played against someone playing a precon, and there was like the person playing the precon pretty much like almost just kicked all our butts. Like
they were the threat basically the entire game.
Was that Jacob?
Yeah. Running away with the game, like just kind of like, I mean, I was ready to face a precon, so I had, picked one of my lower powered deck or more lower.
Did you
powered.
pick the birds?
I did not. I picked my legendary creatures deck, which was
that's strong. But
it's good. But
I love it.
But there was I was expecting a precon and it did not feel like we got a precon, like, which is a good thing. Like you open the box and you can really sit down with people trying to win and be a threat, which is awesome. But yeah, like it's I think there are a lot of things in those designed for people more familiar with Magic than just like precons are for new players. Like I don't know if that's necessarily the case anymore. I think precons are for like a lot of different players.
Yeah, I suppose I've been thinking of picking up a precon for the first time in a while with the new Lord of the Rings sets, actually. Like that Elvish one seems like it could be a lot of fun right out of the box because it has a very political sort of vote mechanic, but it also, isn't just a pure politics deck. It has value and it's Simic.
Yeah, but kind of to go back to my point, Commander has so many cards available to it, and you have 99 different cards basically. That you have to like know what they do and how they interact with each other.
Right.
Which is why I think it makes it more difficult than say like Standard or any of the 60 card constructeds where you're running play sets of 4 in a lot of cases.
Sure. Yeah, that is true. I mean, I think that is complicated, but I don't know. Something about learning in a group environment, I feel almost feels a little bit easier than a one-on-one session, depending on who you ask. Like, I was a little confused the first time I played Commander, but I think I got it. I feel like if I played another format, I don't know if I would like.
Let me
it as
tell
much.
you, learning Magic the Gathering in a one-on-one session, or even like starting by learning like individually, I think is a lot easier than having 3 people try to explain the same thing to you at the same time, like all talking over each other. And it's like, shit, like, no, one person needs to talk right now. But like also like with just how I mean, we talked about like how I got introduced, how all of you guys got introduced. You were talking about, you know, that first game of Commander you played, you didn't really know what was going on. Like, you kind of did, but it was more so like other people telling you what to do.
Sure. Yeah, that is true.
When I started learning, I initially learned on my own, like via MTG Arena, but then when I started playing Commander, I was only playing with one other person. And that maybe isn't as much fun as playing with 4 people, but it also is like half of the interaction. You get like way more time to play because you're not waiting for 2 other people to take their turns.
Fewer options even.
Yeah.
You know, if you have 3 opponents, you can throw something to, you know, any of those 3 plus whatever's on their board typically. Like, you gotta really process what's going on, what's coming next.
Yeah.
It's not exactly beginner friendly. Not that you can't cut your teeth on it, but it's just a little harder.
Yeah.
One analogy I actually kind of heard pretty recently is that whereas other formats are obviously like a card game, Commander feels almost more of like a board game in some instances.
I did hear that, and yeah, it totally is applicable.
It feels like while it does still feel like Magic the Gathering, it feels like a different game.
Right.
I think with that, like, yeah, like Cody was saying, there are a lot less options in a 2-player game. There's not really any politics like there is in a game of Commander, because you're not trying to like make deals with people or trick people into thinking one way or another, or maybe just getting around something in one way or another, making one person attack someone else. It's more just like
Focus on the mechanics
and focusing on taking one person's life total out over another.
For sure.
But yeah, I think kind of getting back into the idea of like just how many cards have been printed for Commander. There have been a lot of cards designed specifically for Commander, and a lot of those cards are released in the pre-constructed decks, which nowadays come out with every single set.
Yeah.
And I feel like
many.
we're getting 4 Commander sets, or 4 Commander precons in way more sets now.
Oh, and we're getting Commander sets too.
Like, sets designed specifically for Commander. They started printing precons for Commander in 2011, and from 2011 to 2019, we looked up and there were about 37, I think, Commander precons printed from, how many years is that? Like 8 years?
Yeah.
In the next year, 2020 to 2021, there were 24 precons printed. So that's 37 over 8 years to 24 in 1 year. Like, so yeah, they're printing that. And then from 2022 to now, there have already been 35 precons printed, which is almost more than the 8-year stint from 2011 to 2019.
Yeah, we looked it up. There have been over 60% of all precons printed in the last 4 years, and it's been like 160% increase from the 8 years prior.
Yeah.
That's wild. And you know, I I guess to kind of put a time frame on things, how much do you guys think the pandemic really affected all of this, or if it did at all?
I think that the ingenuity of people playing Magic, to get spell table games together, being able to play online has really reshaped how we play Magic, basically. Now it's no longer like I got to go to the LGS to find a game.
I can just
Boot up the computer.
go on to Zoom with my friends.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that has really pushed the format into like warp drive.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting because it's like another interesting point is, are most new players to the game, like people who have entered the game from around where Mark and I have entered to now, are most of those people Commander players?
I would probably say yeah. Like it's just exploded in popularity because probably like it does feel more like a board game than it does a traditional card game.
Yeah.
And it's more casual. It's not as certain who's going to be the winner and stuff like that, even late in the game, which makes for some exciting turns and exciting plays. But with there just being so many cards printed for Commander in mind, especially in these precons, because they tend to release at least a few new cards in each individual precon, there's just like an overabundance of these cards that are just good in every deck maybe. And it's maybe a kind of thing with like just making a bunch of really solid mid-rangey cards, which has been a problem in Standard, but
and in Modern and in Pioneer. If you go through the meta list,
and in Pauper.
Pauper's
more diverse.
They're all mid-range decks for the most part, or at least were before this last group of bans.
Yeah. And I mean, that goes to show kind of how Commander printing for Commander is like even affecting that. But I think there's a different feel to cards that are printed for like specifically for Commander. While in some cases there might be like a new Commander printed for a format or a strategy that didn't have one there before. Like, for example, for the longest time, Ron was looking for a Monkey Commander.
Monkey.
And they just, in Jumpstart 2022, released a Gruul Monkey Commander that's perfect for him.
I was so moved by this.
There are also cases where it's just like some of these designs tend to feel very boring and generically good. Kind of how I mentioned earlier with the cards that are just good in white. Like, they just seem to print more and more of those good stuff cards that it's like, if you're going to build a white deck now, maybe you just need to buy like all of these cards because they're just good in every white deck.
Oh, you need a Welcoming Vampire. You need a
Smothering Tide, Teferi's
a staff
Protection.
of the Storyteller.
We could probably go on a little while here and just keep picking off names of
Benny
cards.
Brax.
And if we start going into other colors, I'm sure there's also things that have been printed recently that are just staples in the particular color, like the cycle of free spells if you control your commander, like the
Deflecting SWAT,
Fierce
Guardianship.
Arcane, no, that's a different. Sorry, Fierce Guardianship. There's Flawless Maneuver. There's a green one.
Nobody cares about the green one.
Something Haze, Obscuring Haze, I think.
And then Deadly Rollick.
Right.
And then Deadly Rollick is the black one. Yes.
Yeah, Obscuring Haze is right. And those have been printed recently. There's prior to I don't know exactly when Chaos Warp was printed, but that used to be like almost the only mono red generic removal spell, and now they've printed at least two more, I want to say.
There's Wild Magic Surge, and I want Chaotic Transformation.
There's a few kind of iterations of the card, yeah. But actually, interestingly enough, its first printing is coming from Commander 2011.
Oh wow, that's
Early Commander.
very cool.
I think that's the first Commander set, if I'm not mistaken.
First Commander precons were released then, and now it's kind of a problem even when deck building, because if you sit down and decide you want to make like a I don't know, enchantment deck in white, you can make that deck, but if you want it to be super good, you might replace 10 or even 20 of those cards that would be your commander deck of unique cool enchantments with just good stuff cards that may or may not be enchantments that are just solid.
So you're kind of like talking about maybe like something like Light Paws?
Sure. I've had Light Pause is kind of specifically in the auras category, but in my own experience with Light Pause, there's been a lot of time where I've been like, oh, like I have like Dranith Magistrate, which is just a really good card in Commander to stop your opponents from doing things, or Smuggler's Share, I think I currently have in the deck, but I'm thinking about cutting it because it's not as cool as like running a big aura that just does stuff.
But the raccoons.
But the raccoons, that's the one thing.
Or you could just swap it for a Smothering Tithe.
I have both, Cody. How do I
Already
pick
has a Smothering
one?
Tithe.
The Smothering Tithe is just the better card.
But that, I've also taken cards out of the deck that have been these generically good cards. Like there's a creature that does something very similar to Smuggler's Share. And I think do I have Esper Sentinel in the deck?
I feel like you do.
I feel like I have Esper
I
Sentinel.
know you
in the
have
deck.
Esper Sentinel. I don't know whether you have it in your Legends deck or in your white
It's
deck.
definitely not in my Legends deck
It's
because
gotta be
it's
in your white
it's
deck.
not a legendary creature. But yeah, like so and that's almost a problem with like the homogenization of Commander, which is, just kind of making these decisions once we really get into the game of like what's going to draw me the most cards, gain me the most value so that I can go off and do the thing I want to do, rather than like what's the coolest weird niche card that I can play. And I think that kind of brings us into another point, is just that maybe how we feel about those cards that are designed for Commander compared to cards that were not designed for the format, that just kind of came about naturally as draft chaff or random modern synergy, or something that would fit into a standard set that made an impact. Sure. And how those affect our deck building, and those maybe feel a little bit more exciting when we can make something that seems like a garbage card or seems like it doesn't have a home into the spotlight card of the deck almost.
Yeah, because I think that's maybe a big appeal of Commander, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier just for a second, because at least for me, I got into it because I felt like you can express yourself much more easily in a game of Commander than you can in a game of Standard. Not impossible to express yourself in either, and you always have options, but you can't really get to the level of individuality that a 99 card Commander decks and deck gets, and it's like really a cool thing. And I think a lot of these super niche cards are kind of why Commander is so important, in the fact that they're printing a lot more of these staple cards. It's kind of dividing the player base, and almost like, while I know CEDH is an entirely different format in its own right, there's almost kind of becoming a more defined like other higher power level that's always kind of been there, but it's
like there's
more people are getting there, and
there's CEDH, high power EDH, and then like lower power EDH, and between high and low power EDH there's a scale of different
There's
power.
a chasm of
there's just like a scale of how much bullshit can you fit in
Yeah.
this 99 card deck.
Like, it's very easy, which is one of the reasons I almost like CEDH. It's very easy to be like, oh, CEDH, okay, you know what needs to go in that deck. Like 40 out of the like 100 cards are already picked out for you almost, if
I
not
would,
more.
I would argue that it's closer to like 85 of the cards are picked out.
It probably depends on the deck, but yeah, it could be closer to like 85.
And it really, you're just making a decision on like 15-ish cards, give or take.
And those could be cards that might be slotted in for other cards anyways. It's why I really like the Bergie CEDH deck I have, because I feel like that is way closer to the lower end of how many like CEDH staples are in that deck. Like the deck has a lot more cards that are like, oh, random cantrip that's not really used but has niche play in this deck. But yeah, like CEDH has that like kind of figured out. Like it's like these are cards and formats that like you put in this deck and then it's powerful and it goes.
Yeah, here's the win cons, here's your interaction, and now you have just a tiny bit of room for efficient pet cards that you like, that fit how you're trying to play.
And you got to be strict about those if you're like really trying to play CEDH. I mean, you don't have to be, but
But then you're not playing CEDH if you're not making an optimal choice.
I guess that's a good point, yeah. With high power EDH, it's like, all right, it's a little bit more hard to tell, because in high power EDH, it's not just about like, you winning the fastest. It's also like certain strategies are better against other ones. You can get hosed a lot easier by specific things. There's, just kind of this undefined power level maybe, where it's like, oh yeah, this is a high power EDH deck, but
don't you know it's a 7?
Everything is a 7.
Everything precons are 7s now.
They're like a 6.5, honestly.
Dude, that Frodo precon was so good.
It absolutely was. And if you just tweak that mana base just slightly, it becomes a 7.
I feel like the mana base was even solid.
100%. And it's a trend I've noticed in the precons, because I've been enjoying some of the precon commanders more, where you get a lot of these really good lands that do have the ability to come in untapped, which has always been the problem with the precons, I feel like. Mm-hmm. That plus I feel like they're not trying to slot in, what's the land? Temple of the False God?
Oh,
they're not trying to slot that into every precon anymore.
Thank God. Thank False God.
I always try to get that to be a playable card, but I just cut it from all my decks.
No, that card.
You just need a landfall deck.
Okay, with a landfall deck, I think it's at least playable, but
I was gonna argue, like, I almost put it in every green deck that I had, because I play a lot of land-based ramp in my green decks, but
what if you don't? I guess
the color fixing, exactly, that's my problem. But in my mono green deck,
you could play it.
I've been contemplating it, because that land count is super tight. Thanks, Mark.
It's you're very welcome.
It's a great deck.
I built that one for Ron. It's cool.
Random question: are we doing our Secret Santa this year?
That's exciting. We could have more people this year too, because we've started
adding to the pod. Yeah,
maybe we'll get some viewers in on this too.
Oh yeah, that would be really cool.
Reach out to us on social media if you'd be interested in something like this.
Let's do it. Let's build some decks for each other.
Oh yeah. The last one was really fun. I was talking earlier about the legendary tribal deck that I have. Currently not in its most powerful iteration, but Ron had built that deck for me. And I had gotten Ron in the Secret Santa and built him a very cool modal kind of +1/+1 counter commander mono green thing. It's very cool. Don't put Temple of the False God in there.
Yeah, I cut it. I had it in there for a minute, but I cut it. Don't worry.
Good. It's such I think landfall is the only thing that I would see.
It's
like
Soul Ring,
maybe.
but a land.
Yeah, but it's also Soul Ring that you can't use for 5 turns, but a land.
Balanced Soul Ring.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's fair Soul Ring.
They already made fair Soul Ring. It's like a Modern Horizons 2 card that has like Suspend 2.
It's Suspend 3. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
it's Soul Talisman. I know
Soul
exactly
Talisman. So Soul Talisman. Soul Talisman you can't play for 3 turns. But Temple of the False God, I'm pretty sure, is like the land count has to be 5.
It does.
Actually, like 4 turns when you really think about it, because it's 3 suspend counters plus the turn that you play or suspended on.
So
And
Oh,
yeah,
Like
and-
even
and
if you do it on turn 1, it doesn't come into play until turn 4.
And now that I think about it, Temple of the False God can go online at turn 4 too, because it counts itself as the 5th land, if I'm not mistaken. So you just
Yeah.
need 4 other.
it could go on earlier if you
Yeah,
have
and if
more
you land
ramp.
ramp once or even twice, like yeah.
but at least it's like, if you have one land in your starting hand, if you have 3 lands in your starting hand and one of them is Temple of the False God, would you keep that starting
no.
hand?
Hell
Do
no.
I have land ramp?
Let's
in my hand
say
as well. Do I have rampant growth or
you have rampant growth.
Okay.
Wait, no, you have cultivate.
Kodama's Reach.
You have cultivate or Kodama's Reach in your hand, and you have Temple of the False God and 2 other lands.
One of them is a green source.
do I have card draw as well?
No.
Oh, then no.
Well, okay, you have card draw, but it's not
Then,
like
yeah, I'd possibly.
but it's not
keep
like
that.
brainstorm card draw. It's like
Yeah, like draw a card or two.
no, it's like you
Like
pay
overtime?
3 mana, draw a card.
Yeah, screw it. I'd do that.
But you need 3 mana, and you can't get that with Temple of the False God if you
But
only
if I
have
have
2
two other lands, I'll play that cultivate and then
Cultivate is 3 mana. That's the point.
rampant growth. That's why I said rampant growth.
And then,
first.
but I
All
said
all right,
cultivate.
Okay.
Or Kodama's Reach, which is also
okay.
3.
I didn't think about that they are 3 drops. Okay, if I had a rampant growth, maybe. But if I had a cultivate, maybe if
you're
I
not
had that
keeping that
hand.
hand.
No, probably not.
Unless it's like turn.
I'm also not. I'm also an S tier Magic player.
Unless you're mulling to 5 and you have to dump the Temple of the False God, like you're not keeping that hand.
If I drew 7 and Temple's in that hand, and it's 2 other lands, and I had to drop to 5, that is for sure one of the cards going on the bottom.
Yep. And
Yeah.
I think the only time you're like comfortable keeping Temple of the False God is when you have too many lands anyways, and most likely you don't want to keep a 6 land hand.
Even a 5 land hand.
All right, so we get it. You guys don't like Temple of the False God.
No one does.
I think okay. Landfall decks aside, yeah, I wish it was more playable.
Maybe they'll make a more pushed version soon to sell a precon.
They reprint Soul Ring every precon.
That's true.
Whatchamacallit? There's the Eldrazi precon in Commander Masters. I bet you.
Oh, Temple of the Falser God.
I mean, they are the Eldrazi are the false gods.
Yeah,
themselves, so that's
exactly.
pretty cool.
Maybe they'll print Temple of the Falsest God, and you can just tap it for 2 colorless, and then you gain life. I don't know.
Yeah, but that with what's the card? Forsaken Monument
I don't remember what that one does.
adds an additional colorless to your colorless lands.
Oh, there you go.
At that point, just put the Tron lands in there too.
Maybe also if there's a way that you could get your Temple of the False God to tap for another color, like if you can tutor out
Filter.
like Urborg or Yavimaya to make it a forest or a swamp.
Oh yeah, no
That too.
that does change the equation
But
too.
then in that point, you wouldn't be able to tap it for 2 green or 2.
Yeah, but you'd be able to play it still.
yeah.
like
that's
if
true.
you had an Urborg or a Yavimaya in hand, all of a sudden that land
that
would-
changes the whole
that,
equation.
that it does. Although it would still, Temple
would still be
doesn't-
play that
yeah.
that 3 land hand would still be playable at that,
That
point.
would be. That would be.
Is this going to become the Temple of the False God episode?
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to see what set it was originally printed in.
Zendikar, I'm guessing.
You
that
guessed
sounds
incorrectly.
Zendikar Rising?
Nope. Earlier, you guys
Return to
probably
Zendikar.
return to Zendikar. No, it's not a Zendikar set.
Let me take a
It's
real
Scourge.
educated guess.
You're looking it up on your phone. I see.
Said a
you,
real
cheater.
educated guess. all
Yeah,
right?
that would have been a real educated guess. So that was actually a card that was probably reprinted in Commander 2011, but in its original printing was probably a card not printed specifically for Commander. I was curious to see if that was printed in one of the Commander precons or not, but it is like at one point was kind of a card that was not designed for Commander that was then usable in Commander, but nowadays has fallen back out of favor. And I think in the same way how we're both kind of telling you here, like, Temple of the False God isn't playable. And you're saying, but what if this, but what if that? Like, that's a little bit of, like,
The joy of Commander.
Yeah, the joy of it, and part of that comes to cards not specifically designed to fit in Commander. Like, there's this card that's not that great, maybe in any format, but Commander. But Commander might be the card that you can make these cards work. And I think we're starting to, just with how many cards are printed specifically for Commander now, this is starting to maybe be less of the format where you can just play cards like Temple of the False God or Twiddle. I mean, Twiddle in certain strategies is really good.
Oh, I mean, I have 2 decks that have been basically built around a Twiddle strategy.
So aside from like...
And one of them is borderline CEDH playable.
Yeah. Aside from maybe those strategies, these cards that don't see a lot of Commander play because they're, not great in any format, maybe they're starting not to have a home anymore. Because where are you going to play? I mean, you could just play low power Commander. So, that's kind of designed around that, but...
Honestly, the Devil tribal deck that I built for when we were attempting to do like a budget pod for our Commander group.
Attempted.
Yeah, I think there were like 3 of us that built a budget.
I was the only one who didn't do that because I was intent on building a Pauper Commander deck.
I remember that.
Yeah. But... honestly, that's pretty low power in terms of like how it wins and everything. I would call it a battle cruiser.
Yeah, it's a fair deck. You just swing out with your devils, and if they die, you deal damage.
And then I make more devils.
There you go.
But honestly, that is some of the most fun I have playing Commander is when we bring out like some of these lower power decks and I can just swing into people, and it's so much fun compared to the grind that is like higher powered Commander.
Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah. I think there's a lot of really oppressive strategies, or can be at least, in higher power Commander, or just things that take you out of the game really easily or really quickly if you don't have an answer.
Yeah.
There's a lot more removal in higher level powers in Commander. And the higher level power you go, the more removal you're usually packing.
I find it's kind of 50-50
because I meant more like interaction, because removal is a little too specific, but I think interaction, so things like counter spells and things
absolutely,
like offensive interaction.
You guys play blue?
It's more
always, baby.
It's more like instant speed interaction.
Yeah.
Whereas like in a lot of lower power, I've found that you run into more like sweepers or board wipes.
A lot of ETBs.
Yeah, a lot of sorcery speed, like kill this creature, kill this enchantment, whereas when we get into the higher powered stuff, it's, okay, cool, you gave me priority, cool, that's dying for sure.
I think it's, and maybe you guys disagree with me on this, but I think the best game, you guys wouldn't disagree with me on this, the best games of Commander are the ones where everybody gets to do their thing, I feel like. And
I actually disagree with you. The best games of the Commander are the ones where I get to do my thing and nobody else does, and I win.
No, those are not the best games of Commander.
You're definitely right. Yeah,
that does explain Ron's personality and gameplay to a T, though.
That's a good point.
Ron's decks feel like they're specifically designed to stop me from doing the thing that I want to do.
I can smell when you're cooking up a victory, dude.
Can you smell what Cody is cooking?
Always,
how?
Baby. Always. Dude.
And I've been
It's
good about
it's because you tap out. That's why. When you tap out, I know that on your next upkeep, like, we're done.
Oh my god,
that may actually be true.
That's your tell. That's your tell.
I do tend to overcommit a little bit the turn before I'm about to go.
It's all right. It's better than Mark, who literally just basically like slaps his dick on the table immediately. Just like as soon as he just goes, man.
Turns 1 through 5, Mark's dick is just on the table, looking to beat someone to death with it.
Literally, they're all saying this literally.
Yeah.
That's what a Commander game is like with me.
Yeah, we like to have a special fun commander. I hope our parents are listening to this.
I think, Cody, you have like a really good like evil guy kind of like you kind of have that turn where you're the big bad guy and you're about to do your big bad plan, and there's
Does
just
that make me the hero?
No, that makes you the guy who interferes with the
hero
with the big bad evil guy's plan.
I do like white as a color.
It is.
No,
a good
you're
color.
not the hero, but you're just like the comedic relief that randomly comes in and saves the day.
So I'm the Jar Jar in the middle of a battlefield, slipping and sliding, throwing grenades everywhere.
You are the Sancho Panza to me tilting at windmills.
There have been a lot of games like that, and I love that. Like where Cody's about to win, but I really think like obviously to some extent, like you want to shut everyone down and win kind of without interference.
Yeah, I like it. I like getting myself to a point where I can't possibly lose. I like basically just kind of not necessarily stopping you guys from just doing things in general, but getting to a point where it's like I've obviously outvalued guys to the point where, you know, like no one's going to get resources. I have all the big numbers and you guys have the little numbers.
I think the best games though are the ones where regardless of who wins that game, like everybody has had a chance to like
100%
do something in the game and make it.
Everyone became a threat at one point or another.
Right.
1,000% agreed. Yeah.
I think at the very least, those create the most enjoyment for everyone involved. And compared to like, you know, you don't really get that maybe in CEDH. Depending on the higher power EDH you're playing, you don't really get that. In other formats, like, you know, 2-player formats, you don't really get that either. Commander's a unique space where you can kind of do your thing, make an impact on the board, become a threat, make everyone fear you, and then lose and still have had that moment, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Commander also introduces a whole aspect that we don't really talk about because it doesn't have to do with the game itself in politics, where if you're good at it, you can literally convince people that you're not the threat, that, you know, so-and-so is, usually it's Mark.
Mark is an obvious threat. You don't need to convince people that Mark is a threat. You usually need to, it's usually you or me that people have to like usually people are convincing someone else that you or I are a threat. That's always
Because we are.
We are, yeah, because we're the value players.
And then you guys are always convincing everyone else that I'm the threat. And
yes,
I'm already
exactly. Like,
obviously
yeah,
the
you're
threat.
obviously the threat. Why are you looking at it?
But I like to play Commander because I feel like I'm not maybe the best at the political part of it, where it's like, how do I get people on my side? How do I convince people not to get rid of me? Like that, there have been so many Commander games where I'm at like 5 health and I'm like, I'm just gonna sit here and maybe I'll get to my next turn. But I'm not really good at that part, so I just like to get the cards on the table, hit the ground running, and like win before anything else. Like get that value not through like secretly putting a card down here and no, look over there. Like no. I'm gonna be seen as the threat at one point or another, so I might as well just rip the Band-Aid right off. But kind of segueing into this point, I'm kind of curious what like your guys's maybe some experiences you remember from Commander games or moments that you had in games that were just like kind of big impact or really memorable and stuck out to you and that you even remember now.
Oh, I can think of a couple of them. One of them was a game I was playing at one of the local stores that we play at, and I was in a 3-person table. I was playing the Angelo precon that I had upgraded, and I was going off. I generated like 52 mana. I, cast a big scary spell to kill both players. And I had stuff on my board to make sure that it was uncounterable. I was so sure I had this game locked up. And
That's when they get you, when you're so sure.
Yep. And one of the players just drops a dual caster mage to redirect the spell back at me. And I had a counter spell in my hand, but could not counter it because of cards I had on the board. I had to go digging a little bit to find a removal spell to kill the card that was stopping everything from being countered, just so I could counter the spell coming at me. It was just 30 seconds of adrenaline pumping. Oh shit.
Just digging and digging.
Yes. Before I finally just got the victory and could breathe and relax, and it's the things that make Commander fun for me. Is where your brain is just spinning 100 miles an hour, trying to figure an out for you to possibly even get back to winning the game or just surviving.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome, and having those big crazy moments are probably like the best thing. And I don't know, like if we're gonna segue on to my favorite experience, or one of my favorite experiences, is when we all got together to play the Warhammer decks.
Oh yeah,
that was I was playing the Imperium of Man. Cody, you were playing the
Chaos Marines.
Our friend Chris was playing
Tyranids.
Tyranids, and our other friend Jacob was playing the Necrons. It all felt very thematic of kind of like how we play Magic too a bit.
Oh, absolutely.
So it felt like a lot of flavor points. The Tyranids were getting really big, and our friend Chris is known for making like he plays like Mark. He puts his cards on the table and he will just roll with the punches. And he was just going off with the Tyranids, making massive big dudes. And then I had a vendetta for Cody because Imperium hates the chaos, and also Cody was doing really, really scary shit. And all I was drawing was removal and interaction.
It was the worst for me. Every time I get myself set up to do the big scary thing, there's Ron with a removal spell.
Heretic! I had a great time, and then Jacob was just brooding in the background as Necrons do, occasionally doing some evil crap and bringing some dead guys back to
Killing
life.
stuff, bringing it back.
Yeah, but I'd say the highlight of that was at this point, I've exhausted all of my interaction and resources. So has Cody, and really Chris, who just had this massive 38-38 trample beater, and everyone was taking a bit of damage, so this presented a lethal threat to everybody. And everybody had a creature besides me on the board. And and I've been policing the board a bit and using interaction where so, and I definitely rubbed Chris the wrong way. But I remember the turn before, I top-decked this one card, Entrapment Maneuver. And what this card says is, as I'm pulling it up, all right, it says, target player sacrifices an attacking creature, and I create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens where X was that creature's toughness. And he swings into me with his one and only 38-38 Tyranid. And I just got to play this one spell, and I made 38 tokens all at once, and he had to sacrifice his attacker. And it just felt like the best, like the Imperium forces just come in and save the day. And then the next turn after that, I drew one of the miracle cards, and it was like an X spell that let me create a whole bunch of angels. And at that point, it just felt like the glory of the Emperor coming back. And it was such a long, drawn out game, and the win just kind of came out of nowhere. It literally came from the top of my deck. And it really felt like that sort of flavorful slog of futuristic warfare that is the grim dark future of 40K.
I have quite a few
things. Tell us about it, dude.
I've been looking up. At first, when I had kind of thought about this question, I was really coming up blank. But what really reminded me some of these things was going back and like looking at old deck lists and looking at specific cards. And I think that's how, interestingly enough, I retain all these memories. Like if I see a picture or the art of a card, it all of a sudden brings back the memory of this one time I had with a crazy experience with it. I'll try to keep some of them to points that are maybe more related to this pod. I remember one game where I was playing my Dina Soul Steeper deck, which usually wins through me randomly drawing the infinite combo piece, Exquisite Blood. But
it's always Exquisite
there are
Blood.
also times when I don't win just by doing that. I remember one game in particular where Ron was playing his Snakes deck and had accrued more value than everyone, had about 30 or 40 snakes on the table, and was now at the point in time, and this is where I like to take advantage of Commander, is when Ron has to do counting and like doesn't always get the numbers right, and I just keep my mouth shut. But Ron had successfully counted all of the right damage to deal to each person at the table, and he had more than enough creatures to do so. And I was just like, okay, I have this, because as long as Ron doesn't like overextend at me, I'm good. I was holding up Weather the Storm, which is the storm card that keeps gaining you back life for every spell that's been cast in a turn. And Ron was casting a lot of spells.
I was probably popping off.
I believe even Cody had a spell cast somewhere in your turn.
Yeah,
So
Probably just so I could put a stop to his shenanigans.
just for good measure, Cody cast a spell during Ron's turn. So we were maybe like, I don't know, 5 spells in or something like that. And you had like sent out all this damage. And then I just weathered the storm before combat damage was dealt. Got my life total up. Might have like ended up killing a player with that. And then got you down to super low life. And then on my upkeep, I gained life. You took damage and I won. And I just remember thinking like, dude, like that was all in my hand, like how I played that, how I put that on the table. Like that was just a huge moment where it's like, well, what's going to happen right now? And always thinking in the back of my mind, what if, but that was a very, very memorable moment with
so many fun games.
I remember another one with Dina, actually, and we were playing with the same pod. I think Chris was the 4th player.
Tyranids Chris.
Yes, Tyranids Chris. And he had played a Black Market Connections.
I already know
This
where
was-
this is
So,
going.
just a little context for people listening in. We're laughing because Chris, on more than one occasion, has had to kill himself with his own black market connections on multiple occasions. It happens so often.
And this is one of those times where his Black Market Connections killed everyone else except for me. I had just enough mana to play Dina and play Exquisite Blood, but I didn't have anything that could follow up with like gaining life or any kind of like basically loop to start the combo and end the game. Chris was the next person in the turn order. He already had Black Market Connections out, and Black Market Connections isn't an option. It says you have to pay life to do one of these things.
One of 3 things.
You have to do at least one. So it gets to his turn. Nobody realizes it. I don't realize it. And then he reads Black Market Connections. He's like, oh shit. and then my combo starts, and that won the game there. But
Dude, so many oh shit moments with Chris. I have another really short, funny one too.
Yeah.
Like this was a 3-player pod with me, Cody, and Chris. And
I remember this
Yeah,
game.
so
you already know.
So Chris named this deck the Punisher just because it's basically like a group slug Bernie deck. I don't know. It's weird. He makes wacky brews. It's awesome. And so basically he played this card called Repercussions out, which reads that whenever a creature takes damage, it deals that much damage back to its controller. And we were joking, laughing around like, oh, haha, that's funny if you'd play a Blasphemous Act. And Chris kind of looks us deadpan in the eye guys, and he says, "Oh, I don't play board wipes."
For those who are not aware, Blasphemous Act is a board wipe that deals 13 damage to each creature.
Yes. So so I don't know. I was playing my mono white flicker deck with Elishnor, and I just cast the commander, and I realized I had one open mana, and I'm like, all right. Someone's probably going to try and remove her, so let's see what happens. Cody did some Cody things, and Chris looks at us on his upkeep and says, it's funny that you guys mentioned Blasphemous Act. And of course, the Mad Lad casts it, and there are enough creatures on the board that not only would it kill Cody and myself, but it would kill Chris too.
Oh yeah, 3-way draw. That's what he was going for.
He just wanted to go for the chaos. But I realized that one interaction spell I had was Brave the Elements, which is a instant speed spell for 1 white that gives all of my creatures protection from the chosen color. And protection is a complicated keyword, but it prevents damage that would be dealt by the color of that choice. So I chose red for Blasphemous Act. My creature survived, and I was the last one standing. Somehow.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to repercussions, we were playing in a 5-pod. No. Ron had just gotten to the game, but we had already been in mid-game. Mm-hmm. So it was a 4-pod. And Chris plays repercussions again. I convince our friend Jacob to kill Mark. And then I had to figure out how I was going to win the game from that point. And I was playing this Ashnod deck that I had, and I was tinkering around with some of the ideas, and I went, oh, wait, I can just do this. I had a Blasphemous Act in my hand. I could kill all of my creatures and deal a bunch of damage to the table. And then I could just Blasphemous Act and kill everyone.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
God, I had another fond memory from playing Commander with actually it was a recently upgraded precon that I had. It was when I had Zaxara and I built that X spell tribal deck, so just dumping mana.
You mean freed from the real tribal?
Well, it ultimately ended up being a couple card combo deck, but there was that just a lot of X spell shenanigans going on. And before I had all of the freed from the real and cards that went infinite like that, the precon came with Villainous Wealth, which is a card that says yes. I think, you choose a player, that person exiles the top X cards of their library, and you can play any of them that have mana cost X or less. And we were playing this game at a game store, and it got to pretty late game. I had accrued a bunch of mana on my board. The game was at somewhat of a standstill.
It was let's put it this way, there was a humility on board.
Right, there was a humility on board.
Humility
wasn't there?
is a card, it's a static enchantment that turns all creatures into 1/1s with no abilities.
Yeah, that was annoying. But
I was playing a wall deck. I cried.
I had this Villainous Wealth in my hand, and yeah, the game was going nowhere. It was probably a 2 or 3 hour game, and I was starting to count up, and I realized I think I had somewhere around 20 or so just mana accumulated, and so I'm like, all right, it's time to play some Magic. So I just spend it all and cast Villainous Wealth on the guy who played Humility because his deck was full of good stuff. So I just looked at the top 17 cards of his library and played probably all of them because they were all under 17, and I got stuff weird board wipes, I think Void Winnower, whichever one is
the one that when you sacrifice a creature.
No, Void Winnower
is that the odd number one?
You can't.
Oh, you can't even. You literally can't even. That's
yes,
Void Winnower.
you can't even. That's exactly
even.
You can't play spells
That's how I remember that card.
with even mana value,
and you can't block with spells or permanents with even mana value,
So-
and 0 counts as even.
Yeah, I randomly got like this card off the top of his deck, and just like I remember just like the board was now filled with cards I didn't own, and like so it's one thing if your board is filled with your own deck, and then it's like, oh man, geez, this is a conundrum. What do I do? How do I win this? Like, but it's another thing when it's filled with cards that you don't own, and it's like, how do I play Magic again? Like, I don't remember what any of these do and what order they're gonna go on the stack.
That was a long.
That
turn.
was a very long turn. I take very long turns, but not on purpose. Sometimes,
No, that was understandably long. Did you cast one spell though?
sometimes
You
I
literally
cast one spell and
Technically,
17
he did
things
Okay,
happen.
you cast like 18 technically.
Yeah.
but
I spent mana to cast one, and as a result, had to cast 17 more. But
Yes.
I don't think I ended up winning that game. Someone else had the
Yeah,
out
I think
to it.
ultimately it was the guy who played the humility ended up taking the game. That one was a definitely mismatch of power levels, but it was still a fun game.
was still
It
crazy.
was a 3-hour long game. I remember that while everyone else had rotations, Mark and I were playing that game the whole Commander night.
There was one more thing that's more of a general thing that I really enjoy about Commander, and it has to do with my Tiny Bones deck, which was such a cool story in itself. I remember when I randomly bought a Jumpstart pack from the game store we were at, and we were just sitting down playing Commander games, and I opened this card. I'm like, huh, that's neat. And then I looked it up, and it was like a $15 card at the time. I'm like, whoa. And then I was like, I want to build this Commander. And then it's like one of my favorite decks now. I would have never gotten into black as a color if it weren't for that pack. But Tiny Bones synergizes really well with all kinds of cards that make people discard on their upkeep, including a very special card called Bottomless Pit. I have made so many people feel so bad when they have to discard a card at random, and I really enjoy the aspect of it's like, all right, like you're letting someone else like choose a face down card from your hand. It's like we're doing a magic trick now, but the outcome
making
is
your
never
hands
good.
disappear.
Yes.
So I actually have a funny story that doesn't involve me playing a Commander game
Ooh.
that relates to your Tiny Bones deck.
Okay.
So I remember that we were at the game store, and we were seated at different tables, and you were actually seated with the guy who had played the Humility and has a lot of expensive cards in his deck because he's been playing forever.
Shout out to Humility Guy.
And I just hear him yelling across the store, "F you, Mark! Screw you!" I was like, I know what Mark's playing now.
Let me tell you though, that was one of the most like best feeling moments too, because it was like, you know, this guy had always come with like these super powerful cards, and it'd always feel like, how am I going to play around this? Like, why am I playing Commander? Like, I can't do anything.
You don't have to play against the cards if you make them discard it.
Exactly. Then I get to play Tiny Bones, and I'm like, no, don't worry. Like, it's not that good. And then it was. And then it was like, damn it. Like, now we can't deal with the threat because I discarded my whole hand. And I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted, even though I'm going to die now. I remember that game too. Like, it was like, I had made everyone lose their hands, and I think I was like at a point where it's like, well, I've done my thing. I can't win now, but I did it. You guys can't play Magic either.
He dragged us down with you.
Yes. One of my favorite decks, and I think because it has so much interaction, but also like cards like that really care about like the randomness of something, where it's like a 50-50 chance. I think a card like Gamble too like makes a lot of good stories where
You
it's
mean
like
Red and Tomb?
Red and Tomb / it might be Red and Tomb, but
It's Red and Tomb.
like the cards like that where it's like you have a chance of like maybe Bottomless Pit makes your opponent discard the one card that would be able to deal with what you're doing, or maybe
When it did it to me and I was trying to win.
And then I'm like, no more bottomless pit. Yeah, or I fucking love bottomless pit. Or yeah, you're gambling for like the chance, like you win the game, like if you get this card in your hand, and you have a chance of getting it, or you have a chance of putting it straight into your hand and then straight into your graveyard. Those cards, I think, those randomness, like especially with like card manipulation, while it isn't always the best to play against, it does make a lot of moments where it's like, what's gonna happen now, you know?
Dude, that's why I love my snakes deck. Like, so many crazy stories from that, like you were saying earlier, but also the time when I made 38 snakes after a like 5 spell long stack war between all the players in a game to basically remove my commander, and
Only
then
to get Rakdos
and then I wheeled everyone, and that specific wheel let Mark draw into a Rakdos charm.
Oh my god, that was such a moment.
Yeah.
Oh my
that
god.
was so crazy. And that was a perfect example of that randomness, because if I didn't get that wheel, you wouldn't have got that Rakdos charm until like way later, and I wouldn't have had that many snakes. And it's like, you really take these gambles and
and Rakdos charm was like randomly like the only card that, maybe not the only card, but
it was like probably like
the perfect solution.
Yeah, it was a silver bullet.
Yeah, like you had like however many, like 40 plus snakes or whatever on your board.
38 snakes and 38 life.
It was exactly the right
amount too. That was the funny part.
Oh my god, yeah, like that was an insane. It was all those creatures deal 1 damage to you, and it was the exact amount. Yeah.
And I was probably like a turn away from winning too.
Yeah,
it was crazy.
Oh yeah,
I ramped super hard early on.
If
You
you
were
got to your
100%
next turn,
one turn away from
yeah.
swinging out at everyone and killing everyone.
Not even that, dude. I had basically a Gaia's Cradle up and 40 creatures.
Yeah.
yeah. You guys have any other stories you want to share about commander moments, just weird, cool things?
I mean, we could go on forever about it.
I'm
Really
sure.
could. We could even have like a follow-up episode just about these moments. We like kind of compile them and just...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, if you guys want to hear some more of our stories, definitely let us know. Maybe if you'd be interested in some kind of gameplay type thing as well, we'd also be open to that in the future sometime. But yeah, let's definitely get your guys' feedback. Would you guys like to hear us talk about more of our games and experiences?
Yeah, I think to anyone who's listening, like, if you've gotten this far and listened to everything so far, that means the world to us, because we've been putting a lot of time aside and a lot of effort into starting with what essentially isn't a perfect project, but something that we all have our hearts really into. So
yeah, we've even given up nights of playing Commander just so that we could do this.
yeah,
That's right. It's a shame, but we're gonna get back to Commander soon, and we love doing this.
So to anyone who's listening, thank you very much for listening. I think we're kind of going to be wrapping up our first 5 episodes here, and with that, like, we have a lot of ideas for changes that we want to make, for improvements and for adjustments to make everything from the audio quality to what we talk about more entertaining and more listenable. So if you have any feedback, anyone who's listening, email us at mtgevolvingwild@gmail.com, or reach out to us on social medias, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, yeah, Reddit. Like, we want to hear that feedback, and we hope you've enjoyed these first 5 episodes that we've put out, and hopefully many more to come.
Yeah, I'm excited to be done with this first block. I'm, excited to potentially come back and do this even better.
Yeah, this has been a fun experience. I'm so grateful we've been able to have it, and let's hopefully see what the future holds for us.
Definitely a new experience, new things to be learned, and a lot of exciting ideas in the future. I think we're all kind of brimming with like, what are we going to talk about next? What are we going to do next? So stick around for that. I'm sure we'll have more in-depth updates via social media, And yeah, hopefully you've liked what you listened to so far, and you'll be back for what we do next. But thank you all for listening.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks again, guys. Take care.
Peace.